Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at NECA's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Turtles in Time Leatherhead, which is basically the same as the other Leatherhead, but in a Turtles in Time variant color scheme, which means he has pixelation in his paint job. And usually NECA does a really good job with that. We'll see how did it turn out on this one. Is it good? Is it bad? Well, you can kind of see it already. But there's a couple things we're going to talk about that'll probably not be readily obvious. But overall, as is usually the case with NECA's turtle figures and just about everything else they made, it looks pretty darn good. I gotta tell you, it's so saturated, it looks just like the character model, other than he's probably a little bit too slender. But either way, this figure's mostly awesome with a few issues, so let's go ahead and get him off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about, let's just go ahead and include his hat, about 6 3/4 inches, which makes him pretty close to a little over 17 centimeters, closer to 17.5, I suppose. And so he's got some size to him, but he's definitely really squatty in the game. His sprite was very broad, he was very girthy. This guy's not quite as girthy, but he's obviously very thick, so it's fine. I think it's a decent enough representation. And I suppose once you bend his knees and bend his arms up a little bit, he'll probably get closer to that game sprite, so that's pretty good. And as far as the paint job goes, as you can see, it's saturated as heck. It is very colorful, and that's awesome. The colors are all fairly accurate as far as I can remember, so that's good. The only thing that stands out to me, and this has been an issue a couple of times now, some of the pixelation is angled, which is not how pixels work. So I think they're just doing that. Maybe they're trying to account for posing. So like if you bend the knee like this, they end up being square. Maybe they're doing that, which is nice. I don't know. Some of them are crooked, some of them aren't. That doesn't really bother me, but I know some people are probably going to be like, the pixels aren't all square, and I get that, but it's still a 3D action figure made to look like a 2D sprite. I think this is fine. I think it's okay. The paint job's a little fuzzy in a couple places around the vest. It's not terrible, and that's probably going to vary. It's actually the brown, which is the fuzziest, so it's almost none of it, so that's okay. Usually you see yellow and orange be an issue because they're hard to paint, but it's the brown, so that's a little bit odd, but the rest is fine. Paint job's clean everywhere otherwise. Very nice, relatively matte to satin finish, except for a couple places, like this is satin, but everything else is matte. So yeah, it looks really, really good. The eyes look good, the teeth are painted well, the mouth is painted well. I don't really have any issues other than that pixelation and the fuzziness. So aesthetically speaking, 9 out of 10. It looks really, really good. As far as accessories go, we have the 2 fist hands that come out in the package, 2 gripping hands, and then 2 open hands. I do believe, and I don't have mine out to check, but I do believe these are the same hands as Bebop and Rocksteady from the cartoon releases, the only releases. I do believe it's the same hands. I don't care, whatever. They fit him, that's fine. Maybe the arms too, honestly, the arms look the same, so it could be. Anyway, we also get the pixelated knife, which is sculpted and painted pixely, and that is really cool. I like that, very nice. So accessories, I'll give them a 7, nothing crazy, but it's, well, I mean, I guess technically you could say 8, I don't know, it's fine. The accessories are what they should be, and there's no issue there. Okay, so for the articulation, the head is on, I believe it's a single. It could be a double, but you can move the head around as if it's on a ball peg with very, very limited range. So rotation, unless you force it, you don't get a ton. As far as up and down goes, unless you really force it, you don't get a ton. But it is there, and you can lean it. So it's definitely at least a single ball peg. The mouth does open. Doesn't open a ton, but it does. And that looks pretty cool. They did a good job painting that. The teeth tuck in around the bottom of the mouth. It's all PVC, so it's like relatively flexible. So if you stretch it open, it won't close necessarily right away, but it will eventually, so that's fine. For the shoulders, we have ball hinge shoulders, which go out just perfectly horizontal. That's fine. Full rotation. They're a little soft, like they're not tight, but they're not floppy. They're not going to be an issue, I don't think, so that's okay. That doesn't bother me. They function and they hold their position. I imagine some people may get loose ones, but I like it. It's better to have this than it is to have a tight joint, I think, so that's good. You do have your bicep swivel. That's very tight. Double jointed elbow works just fine. You'll get better than 90. Wrists have a swivel and a hinge. That's all fine. His torso has a ball peg. It's underneath. It's in there underneath. So you can't see it, and I can't really show you, but this is all an external layer that moves around. It doesn't give you a ton of range again, but it's enough. leans back a little bit, leans forward a little bit. You can actually get them to go pretty far forward, but the green has to go over the purple and the yellow, so that looks a little bit strange, but you do get the range out of it. So if you wanted to give them a more hunched over pose, you could definitely do it. So I guess that's good. Better to have that than to not. Although, well, I was just gonna say maybe they could have done the belt as part of the top part, even though that wouldn't have technically made sense. That way when you posed it, it always looked like he had his pants on and not his stomach hanging over his pants. But either way, this works, that's fine. That's just me thinking from an engineering standpoint. For the tail, it's a double ball peg, so you can get a little bit of range out of it, not a ton. If it was a single ball peg, it'd be less. I like that they did it that way. It does allow you to shift it and then bend it. Still limited, but it is there. Nice paint job on the tail, by the way, very clean. For the hips, we're back to the same kind of hips. You know, these legs might have even been used for, I want to say, Bebop. There's a lot of reused parts on here. I didn't notice at first. I don't really care. Maybe that's why he's slender. I do kind of care. Oh, I want to point out something else. I didn't notice this in the aesthetic, or mention it in the aesthetic. The muscles on his thighs, I bet most people would never even notice this, but this is a review, and I did, so I'm going to include it. Look at the shape of his thigh muscles on both legs. They are entirely different sculpts. Either one would look fine on its own as a stylized version of those muscle groups, but having them side by side and the muscles entirely different shapes, that's very strange. I have to wonder now if Bebop and Rocksteady had that. One of them, whoever used these parts. All my stuff's in storage right now, so I don't know, but that's strange. Anyway, double jointed knees are very stiff, but they do work, so that's good. Plenty of range. You'll be able to pose this guy well enough. Ankles. Oh, we do get a swivel at the boot, by the way. Ankles have a ball peg and a hinge, so the hinge works. Going back, pretty fine. Going forward, that's pretty good. And then you get the rotation. I guess it's probably a straight peg. So yeah, ankle rocker works. Not bad. It's not a bad batch of articulation. It's better than you would expect for this kind of character design. And for NECA, they did a really good job managing to do the aesthetic and the articulation on this guy, which sometimes they lean a little bit more than I'd probably prefer into the aesthetic, but obviously that's their choice. So I'm gonna go with, for an articulation on this kind of design, I think it's an 8. It's a pretty good batch of articulation. I just realized I forgot to go over the hips after I got distracted by the thighs. I'll show you the hips. They go all the way out to the side pretty much, so that's good. And then they go pretty far forward. You have to scrunch his junk a little, but a little scrunch junk never hurt anybody. And then you do get a thigh swivel. So it's pretty much your standard hips. They're not as floppy as they could be, but they are loose. I don't know that it's going to be a huge issue, but it is worth mentioning. So yeah, I still think 8 for this guy. For the aesthetic and the shape, I think 8's a fair rating for that. So now it's time for the final verdict on this guy. He came out way better than I thought he was going to. I thought it was going to be a problem. I guess that's mostly because he uses a lot of old parts, which already work nicely, and they were able to save some budget and still give us a release. I do wish he was a little stockier and we had some better issues, or better things that weren't issues. Issues that are problems that are issues now could be better if they weren't issues. That's a good way of saying it. But it's still a really strong release. I mean, you know what you're getting by now with NECA. You're going to have some issues with the articulation, but you're going to have a really aesthetically pleasing figure, decent accessories. If you don't know that by now, then you haven't collected any NECA stuff. And if you haven't, that's fine, but I've reviewed it all, so you should check the reviews, and then you'll know exactly what you're getting into before you buy the stuff. And this is no surprise other than it turned out really nice, and I thought they were going to have more limitations in this region. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. Final verdict, 8 out of 10. Definitely leaning into the aesthetic, and that's fine. I'm okay with it. There are definitely some issues. Back to the issues I would fix, but 8 out of 10 seems fair to me. I don't think anybody's going to buy this and be disappointed. They're going to be pleased to have it. So there we go, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you did not enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, well, give it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button, because I have new videos like this almost every single day and thousands already on the channel. So make sure you come back for all of that. And in the meantime, keep collecting.